books and stuff, over a dozen books that she's been able to illustrate and publish. She runs a studio out of the old Lutheran church down in Grand Marais. That was built in 1903, and then almost 100 years later is when it actually became a studio. She's been working out of there ever since. So she wrote her first book, Antler, Canoe, and illustrated this one. We have it available for sale along with her other books as well. So if you guys would join me in welcoming Betsy.
Thank you. Are you hearing me? Mm-hmm. Okay. If not, like, send word. The title of this talk that I came up with in the winter, whenever I had the nice invitation to come up here in July, it comes from a question that my cousin asked. I had 4 cousins, four my age cousins, like 5 years ago, and they all came to town. They'd never been here before, and all in just different condition of familiarity with rural. Well, then what? Is there volume?
No, it should.
Yes. Better? No? Need help?
Just want to make sure we can hear it on the video and everything good. Try that.
Okay, yes, no?
Same.
Battery check? Volume? Chicka chicka boom boom. Okay, so my cousins, well, I'll just do a little anecdote. So my cousins came to visit, and had never been here before, and so a couple days in, they were staying in town, Grand Marais, and my cousin Terry said, "Betsy, where's the Northwoods?" And it was so unexpected. It was the most unexpected question. I'd never been asked that before. To this area are about, say, Northwoods County book. Anyway, so she got me thinking about how I got to the North. You asked the question, had grown up in Indiana, and my parents first came here in the early '60s. Urban life, and I think that sense of contrast, all the paths laid out in the quadrant. This is different, even though Lake Michigan was a presence in my growing up. This is really different, and so I use a big word. Has life and another way of life. My parents were really good at pointing that out. Like, see, all these kids had rented the house and they wanted to know how that worked. And she pointed out that they didn't need shoes in the summer. And it was Antler, Canoe, and Northwoods alphabet book, and that was published in 1991. And so I started thinking, well, what came before that? That wasn't totally out of the blue. Growing up, art instruction, that was what I wanted to learn. And I finished high school in 1965. So 1970, I took classes at the Grand Marais Art Colony. They're really substantial teachers, and I think still are. Probably I'm not as actively involved there right now. So I had a chance to learn, and there was also in the 70s here there was a little publication called Women's Times. It was just a local, kind of brainstorm of Jane Lind, who was married to Hedstrom, and just to place her in the community, I guess. And she had a background in graphic design, and she asked me that if I would do illustrations for this month, no. Well, it was quarterly, I think it was monthly for a while, maybe most of the time quarterly, but for like 1976 to early 80s. That was a publication, and that was a lot of design and illustration work for me. So I had, besides the homestead work, great big garden, canning, all of that, all those tomatoes, and my barefoot kids running around. It was a lot. That was a busy time for me. And I always kept a sketchbook. I still do that. A little more. Now I have a little bit more from my imagination, I think. But I love to sit down with a flower in front of me and draw it. For instance, this was a hockey game on TV, which was not apparently that engaging to me, but looking at the people watching the hockey game was a lot. And then, easing into the 80s, I liked doing design work. I still like that. That we call it commercial art, now we call it graphic design. It's mostly electronic, but at that time, the only way I really know to do this kind of stuff very well is by hand. So these are hand lettered with a pen. And there was, to make type, let's see, where is it in type? So you buy a page of type, and then you position it wherever you wanted it, and then you rub it, and it would come out the thing without, way pre-computer. It was how it was done, and a lot of examples, stuff that you stuck on with wax. And I like that. I like doing that kind of design. It's pretty, it's kind of satisfying to me. And then, again, the sketchbook, always, kids must have been kind of smallish at that point. And I was fortunate to learn early on in art school that just drawing the human form was really a terrific. Not once in a while I'll do that watching TV, kind of perky, and it's kind of boring. Once I got into, actually in the 70s, was when I learned to make a woodcut. And I did, I was a church mom at that point, and so I did, there was a printer, the church bulletins were printed either by, a local printer, moving back in history, local history, Marion Kilmer, and he would print at least the covers, and then there were different kinds of mimeograph kind of things, that made the Sunday church bulletin. And so these were some of my first woodcut making experiences, and I had already the understanding of how there was going to be this much space, and so what I did needed to fit into that space. So designing a page was, a familiar thing to me. To do something that was as complicated as a book, I unearthed a few other things from before Antler, Canoe, and this was one of them. It's a little story about coming down and being sought out at the lumber mill. My first husband I was pretty familiar, and the first woodcuts were carved on the scrap ends of the boards that you should be able to pick up. So there's a little diagram of that too, of the palette with the sign. And I would just pick scripted. And then the tools to carve. 19, usually I put the date on 1986. which probably was a bit of a inspiration that came from the Women's Times experience. Illustrator, I was the main one. Well, but anyway, I drew a lot of pictures. But the writers, such as Joanne Hart, who lived at the old, was a wonderful poet, and so she proposed. So I did. It's called "I Walk on the River at Dawn: Poems of Winter," and we. So I did these sparse little kind of wintertime drawings that to me were reflective of her poems, and so we ended up with a little book about it. And she funded it, I think. It was $5.95 and had its own ISBN number. Pretty put together, but I think who is the publisher attributed to this? I don't copyright from us, but I guess Women's Times Publishing. So the magazine took on the copywriting or the production of the publication, which is, if you're making books, that's sort of something it's good to know. Anyway, here's a project that I did myself, which is, I think, also that I read about, which was 1990. So now I'm moving on into, closer to the Antler Canoe project. And this is, I could probably read this to you, Loon Story. Good Real Press, so that was my name for me doing this. Loon Story unfolded on a series of Sunday canoe trips to nest on the side of the small island nearest the lake shore. The next week, there were 2 eggs. And in following weeks, we surprised the sitting parent as we paddled through the Narrows. On the 5th Sunday, as we approached the island, we could see both parent loons swimming at a distance, and through binoculars spotted one chick. As we neared the nest, we saw broken eggshells and one yet whole, but with a whole, egg. And by mid-afternoon, the chick had hatched, black and soon fuzzy, afraid that our presence had interrupted their ancient cycle of events. We returned the next day to the diet artist's footnote from 1987. A dramatic story for me. I had feelings of witnessing a primordial birth, part of one of the threads which keep life whole on planet Earth. Magic to me is the life within the smoothness and thinness of the eggshell. From eggy goo to peeping and diving in 29 days, it's beyond me to grasp. And I made 200 copies of this little hand-sewn book. I had some help sewing it and printed all the hand-printed the covers on the first edition of it. This is the second edition from 1992. So all in all, there were like 400 copies. And then immediately got Antler to happen, that project to happen, which was with a Boston, big deal Boston publisher. I never imagined anything like that. But I had a chance. I was acquainted with Ingeborg Pulte, who at that time lived in the center in town. We can eat those little meatballs. So each week I did a weekly newsletter and then a woodcut of the week. Then I printed probably 10 of on the kitchen table there. And this is the kitchen table one is one of my favorites. Anyway, this is it was never really published, but I like making a calendar every year, so I had the thought of assembling the content there into a calendar. So that's what this is. July. There was this linoleum on the kitchen floor out there. So just a shabby little cabin still standing. At the time, my agreement was, I'll fix the roof. And it seemed like just those little, very simply built cabins. If someone kept the roof intact, then maybe painted it once in a while and just kind of gave it some care and propped it up. It seemed like those just kept going for decades and decades. It was quite something to just be more acquainted with the Isle Royal history of the fishing industry and immigrant, Scandinavian immigrant families and the native people and how they had used that part of the world. But anyway, so this says, you know, in handwritten kind of letter to my friends, August 14th, Right Isle Royal. A Merganser parade was going by this morning as I walked out to the dock to see how much water was in the boat after last night's rain. Not quite up over the new floorboards, lashed together from wood strips left over from the new dock project at Malone Bay. More Bay on today. This was a canoe that I called the Ernie O after my dad. Really heavy by today's standards aluminum canoe, but it was a lightweight aluminum craft at the time. It's like 70.
Only 70.
Yesterday was a paddle day. Stuff a lunch in the pack and strike out for hay baiting. It felt like just the sort of day for a very little brain. That's a way to prove. Poking along all the beaches, picking pebbles off the bottom. One of the parent eagles was around, also an osprey, both majestic big brown birds, and the observation of the week is that the seagulls pick on them. Seems to echo us and them human dynamics. A good kitchen table week for ruminating. To be continued. And then the mail boat stopped 3 times a week. And I would give them a grocery order, and I would give them my outgoing mail. So every Wednesday I gave them the outgoing packet addressed to Secrets Gallery. They would carry, you know, my little woodcuts, what I had been doing at the time. And they, I had set them up with a notebook, and so they'd clip the newsletter to the notebook with the woodcut of the week, and then they would have some woodcuts to sell also. So that was my weekly structure. There was some other story there, probably Joanne Hart said, what would you do if you just did art? As in, like, suppose you had no structure. What would you do? Like, what would you do? And I didn't know. And so this was a test for that. Because I really had no job, or, you know, I was just spending time. I was about age 40. And so I right away made a structure. It was like, okay, every week I'm going to do make the woodcut, make the newsletter, and then that's what I'm going to do. So it made a kind of a nice thing. It was 10 or 12 weeks total that summer episode that I was up there, and then more. An editor who lived locally that I had a family connection with. Well, she didn't live here, but her family did. At the time, Little Brown Company, publishing company in Boston, and she had an even stronger family connection with Jan Stevenson, and so I worked for Jan as a gallery clerk at the time, and Jan said, well, maybe Anne would like to see your Isle Royal project. So she kindly, took it home and thought about it, and then asked me if I'd be interested in doing a Northwoods alphabet book. And so, and that was a big deal. So and she helped me. She liked that. She said, as I got to know her better, as an editor, to offer sort of hosting in a way, like hosting a new person to their first book. That was something that had meaning for her. And so that was where Antler came from as an entity. And so she explained to me, this is how you do it. You make a dummy book. And that, like when I say that to the first graders, they all go, anyway, the publishing company produced these little blank books with 32 pages. That was, I really didn't know very much about the whole industry. And she, except that I read a lot to my kids, and it was meaningful, the books, illustrated books. So anyway, she gave me these books to mess with. And then, anyway, somebody's idea was to make a storyboard, which is a pretty common way to try to get all the thoughts on kind of in one view. So this was my storyboard for Antler Canoe. It's a little, I think by then we had done some tests, sample art. I did a couple of cuts at sample art, like this is here's a potential page layout, and how does it go in this? They said, well, let's do uppercase, lowercase. And, it was a very enjoyable process. There was somebody out there that cared as much about this project as I did. And that's pretty great, and somebody super skilled. She wrote the way that she interacted was to write letters. She was very strong letter writer, and then she would suggest one thing or another. I enjoyed that editorial process. And then so there was that, and then she needed to present to her board this prospective project, and so couldn't you just write a little? I just pretended I didn't know how to write, but I only picked about it. And she said, well, couldn't you just write a little bit, make a little compendium or something. Anyway, so she took these little postage stamp drawings and made it, copied my little handwritten compendium notes, and made this dummy book in a way that her committee would be used to looking at it. I'm still dumbfounded by the publishing industry being able to look at this and say, yes, okay, we're going to just spend money, do it, we believe in it, it's going to be great. Well, it's not yet. How great is that? So then, so then there were more comments and details, and so then this is the a more involved kind of the final dummy book that has more specific layouts. Even the type is pretty close to the final layout. And this I learned later was a little more elaborate dummy book than they were used to getting, I guess, but I didn't know. So which was good, because it was really helpful to me to have so much already figured out. So what I did was, there are 32 pages, and some of the things that we want are like a title page, or maybe a spread of a title page, a copyright page, what other things go in the front and back. And there are 26 letters, and so that takes up 26 to do one per page. And so that leaves 6 pages to figure it. So I figured out the puzzle, how to get it to all fit in there. And then I decided to make it also be chronological. So January, be February, March, April, May. So that's 12 months. Well, that's only 24. So there's an extra January and there's an extra December, because we know that those are much longer. And so then this was quite exciting to get the agreement that yes, they wanted to do that. the book, and then to see really the final thing. It took probably a couple of years, or I don't know, maybe a couple of years from the beginning of like, hey, do you want to start thinking about this, to the final approval of everything, and then 6 months to actually do the final art, which was pretty intensive, really working on it, most days. So the final version is made from woodcuts, and they're hand colored. So it's like a black and white. It would be a black and white page, kind of like the it would look like this, printed from the wood with blacking onto the paper, and then I would take watercolor paint and paint in the parts that I wanted to paint. And that was the technique for this book. So a little bit more about woodcuts then. Here's a more more current. Okay, so that was 1991. Now during the 2000s, I did, lots of woodcuts. And so here's one from the last year or so. And starts with wood. And then I just take little chisels and favorite X-Acto shape of blade there. And there might be, one more. There's another shape that's kind of fun to look at. So really, pretty much that's the tool. And they're just small, they don't plug in or anything. It's just, hand. They just sit down and work and mix a little debris of wood chips. And then, and so that's what these are, is the design carved into the wood. So these 3 blocks, this is not really a fast forward, but it's longer than it does to show you. But these are the cutouts, right, or they were in the past, from the lumber mill. That's exactly, really the nice ones were easy to find at that point. And then the ink comes in tubes, and it's as goopy as peanut butter. And so I roll it out on a piece of glass or such, and then roll it right onto the wood, and then paper goes on that, and it either runs through a press. Now I have presses that are machinery. It's like a roller, like a roller with pressure, not more pressure than a regular washer, but there's a roller that goes over the top of this with the paper on it, and it presses the paper against there. If you don't have a roller, you take something like a wooden spoon or something shaped like that, and then you rub on the back like this to make it the ink press to the paper, and then it picks up the imagery, like rubber stamp concept. Really good time. So again, the first stage. This was this ended up being in a calendar. I'll show you in a minute. So this is the January, February, April page. I decided to do trees, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to approach it like a book this year, and make a little storyboard. So this was it. So this is what we're making in wood now, just that little scratchy drawing. And so here are the steps to it. This is this one. And then this might be this is some of these were used a couple times, and then I can't always remember exactly how done. I think this is the green one plus the pinkish one. There's the brown one. This was actually the pink, another version of the pinkish one, but it was changed. It was first printed the bigger shape and then changed and then printed the darker color. That's this, I believe. Then, now we have 3 things going on. Then we have this second version of the green. I know I'm glazing over too, don't worry. It's gonna turn out. So here are all the colors except, where's the black? So here's the black one. Then, but it's really the first one, kind of invisibly the first one, because it becomes the template for all any of the other color blocks. And so here's the black then, which is the last thing to go on top. And then, so there's the final one. And there's but this isn't exactly what happened to the calendar, partly because a year ago I had a broken arm, right? I had like print 1 and half of print 2 going, and then crack, it broke. So, so later then I thought, well, maybe I can do these all by paintings, and that sounded really fun at the time. And so, well, it was super fun actually. So here is the painting version of the woodcut print. And I had never quite done that before, really taken, the woodcut to inform the painting, and then now taking the paintings to inform the woodcut. So I'm working on the birches. That's the next page. So now I'm taking this one, which was the painting in the first place only, and I've got the blocks all cut for the woodcut part of it. So now what we have. So now we have, this is just like, what do I do? What do I do with my days? I have a shop, so we have stuff to keep the. It is fun. People come and visit. So now there are 2 of these calendar prints. I call them the calendar tree prints, and then the birches will be next. And that's what I do now. So that's, I think, the story basically that I had to tell. And then I thought I would ask you what questions you have, and I can chit chat or.
I'm really curious because you started sketching, which uses a pen, and then you went to exacto knife. So, like, how it just would seem it would be really hard to switch your tool and still be after to get exactly what you want out.
Yes, it's a really different effect. I think part of what appealed to me about the woodcuts, about going from the sketches, and I was kind of frustrated early on as a painter. I didn't know how to get what I wanted. Drawing, I felt like I did catch on to, and was satisfying. The painting it just was harder. Anyway, I had a teacher during that early college, and had drawing classes with him, and he just thought I'd like knowing about woodcuts, so he just showed me the stuff of it, and I did like it. Partly, in a way, I think it was more like drawing and painting because it was just about simple shapes. It was about the essence of it. It wasn't fussy, or I guess like my first ones were more complicated. You can get pretty fussy, but it was. It made such a bold look that I really liked. I really gravitate to any block prints that I see by anybody anywhere. It's so interesting to me what can happen with it. So I don't know if I know how to exactly define it, but there's something about seeing and expressing it that's some core of that, I guess is related. And then, but yes, the tools are so different, and now I'm friends with painting.
Yeah.
And I think because I've done so many woodcuts then for quite a long time, then that was the ticket for me to find a way to paint from that.
And two questions. What kind of wood do you use?
I use the local pine
Just
for the
pine?
most part, yeah.
And like, that one
Well,
uses,
white pine is better.
yeah.
Like that really nice, like those nice trees that went down, is really nice wood in there.
So you, like that one picture takes multiple boards, right?
Yes,
Do you sketch the picture on the board first?
yes, especially the first one. I draw it right on the wood.
Okay.
And then, not, it kind of scribbly, it doesn't really look like this by the time what it does, the drawing doesn't really look like what this looks like later printed.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess maybe it's a sense of not wanting to do it twice, you know. I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's just a sort of a method I've gotten to with it, just to kind of give myself a suggestion and boundaries so that I know what the shape is. And then, once this is carved and printed, and once I print it, I can see if I like or don't like the lines, and if I like something that's there that I can trim up, then I do that. And if I like something that's not there that I wish were there, then I think about that.
Yeah, I'll just put the wood back on.
The little stuff. But then the cool thing that I learned from a printer is that I can take this, print it onto something, for instance, of acetate, transparent thing, and then print that back into this. So if you look up closely, you can see that printing, and then I can cut around, and I know the shapes match. You know, the whole thing matches. I know I'm pretty set. It's called making an offset. And that bonus trick of the trade right there. You can do it with like tracing paper or different methods, but that's a method that I learned that I really like. And so then the whole story is right there, at least for the approach that I take. And then so then I know how the next block is going to relate to that first one, and then the same any subsequent blocks. There might be more than 2 color blocks, but I don't know. My son Jeremy prints with me, and I don't know. We like to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh, this
So
will be simple.
do you clean the blocks off after every time you print them?
Well, yes, after each session. So it's oil-based ink, which stays good, but each print will pick up a layer, so then it needs a new layer. This is the hand method. The press method's a little more, the details are a little bit different, but yes, so then, each new layer of ink, and so then I don't really need to clean it for the most part. In between, if the ink is thin enough, it doesn't fill in the little gaps. If it is filling in the little gaps, then we clean and come back tomorrow usually because there's might be too much solvent to, until it goes away. So we use a little bit of solvent, sometimes vegetable oil, otherwise just a little bit of like a mineral spirits or something like that to clean. And then yes, when we're done, then clean them up. It just seems polite.
So do you seal the board at all before you do it? So the ink doesn't soak into the board itself?
No, but I don't. I'm not in the habit of doing that, but it's not an unreasonable thought. And I just let the ink be the sealer. But I don't seal with the backs generally but we had one that was a pretty big, for us, big print. And didn't get, carved the block, and then it was like a month later, we got to it, and it just didn't fit anymore. It had shrunk that much, it shrunk like an eighth of an inch. And it wouldn't, the sheets wouldn't fit, I had to do it over. So it can change, but this, I don't know, it's nice if the blocks are dry. There's some, yeah, but the press will, or the handwork even more will deal with the block having maybe worked or changed a bit. It's a fiber.
Yeah.
So there's some things that are gift about that. It has no flexibility. What else? Yeah.
So you print, then how long does that have to dry before you can put the next block on to print?
Usually
For the car.
Usually overnight.
Okay.
Yeah, usually overnight.
You don't use a dryer in your ink?
We do use a dryer most commonly, and which is nice if you just want the. I mean, if you use too much, then it's inconvenient.
Well, it thins it out, doesn't it, too much?
No, I say one.
Okay.
Toxic, whatever it is. Yeah.
Two questions. One is, how long does it take to carve like one the size that you're?
It's well, probably 2 days, just because my arm gets tired. It's really.
And the second question is, do you have interns that come and work with you and learn some of this? They pass on this beautiful art and technology.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, all my kids gone to do it. I have 3 boys, 3 grown-up boys, and Jeremy has been the printer for like 25 years. Since when we after that, I think I printed. Well, since pretty almost as far back as Antler, Canoe, and he hasn't always. There are interludes in there where he, with the other half of his life is related to sailing. And,
Understand that.
yeah, I took note of your shirt. And he doesn't go and do that circuit anymore, but he did. And, they all did, all 3 of them, sail also. But they all know how to do that. My younger son was the one that actually went start to finish through college, and he was a studio art major, and he did part of his final project was a letterpress catalog of the 3D items that he made for the other part of his project. It's kind of
Sweet.
So he's skilled up with it, and oldest son isn't inclined so much in a way to do that, this type of work, but he wanted to hand print his wedding invitations. This was quite a while. So he did, we helped him do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where did you go to school? The one that took the art?
Carleton College.
I'm not from, is that
Oh,
Minnesota?
It's in Minnesota.
Okay.
It's-
Northfield, right next to
Okay.
St. Olaf.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm from Iowa. It's Drake, it's Howard University, not the state.
Right. Carleton College is, yes, north of Minnesota,
Okay.
and so is St. Olaf.
Yeah. Well, I've heard of Carleton, but I wasn't sure it was Carleton, Minnesota, if there were other Carletons. I
Yeah,
don't know.
there's a town in Carleton,
Okay.
so it's not the same.
It's in Northfield.
Okay.
Yeah, just to make it sound.
That's fine.
Well, what else? Didn't tell you anything else?
Is that where you went to school then too? Because you talked
No,
about,
I never did, but,
oh, you, okay.
I finished undergraduate degree at Vermont College in Montpelier. Was where I kind of put it all together, and then had other experiences here and there. The teacher that I referred to at the top, the woodcuts, was in Sarasota, Florida, at New College, which is now part of the University of South Florida. And at that time, in the mid-60s, it was really quite experimental, which is what appealed to me. there for a year.
Were you doing wood print then, or some other
Some
medium?
of them. And then, well, then I went back to Sarasota for, to Ringling School of Art.
Mhm.
And that was a substantial place. And then here and there, you know, where there were classes, I would take,
Mhm.
just do what I could. In the midst of the, the homestead and the barefoot kids and all that. I brought, there are, as Jamie mentioned, there are books. If anybody, you know, wants to be, wants books to take home, and then here I got calendars and prints you can look at and or, you know, take home, and we'll help you with that.
Thank you so much.
Actually,